And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are very excited to host for the very first time India Security Dialogue at the 6th ASSOCHAM India Smart Data Centers and Cloud Infrastructure Summit. Join us to explore cutting-edge strategies and innovations in cybersecurity and privacy. Now, this dialogue is presented by Qualys and our privacy partner, BlackHat Technologies. So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, as part of India Security Dialogue, our next session is going to be a fireside chat. We are honored to have two very distinguished speakers who are going to join us for this very interesting discussion. But first up, we have with us Mr. Shailesh Athalye, Senior Vice President of Product Management at Qualys, who is also a renowned speaker at BlackHat, InfoSec, and QSCs. Can we have Mr. Shailesh Athalye on stage, please? Let's give a big round of applause as Shailesh joins us on stage. And before we call upon the second speaker, I would request Shailesh to please address the audience with your key insights.
Right, thank you so much. Like she already introduced, so Shailesh Athalye, I look at the product for Qualys. Qualys is a leader in cybersecurity, which helps global customers measure, communicate, and eliminate the cyber risk. I'm based out of San Jose, but we have one of the biggest offices specializing in cybersecurity in Pune. And we work with a lot of customers to understand their use cases. And at the end of the day, that's the biggest part of our jobs, right? Like making sure that we meet you, the IT teams, the security teams, and making sure that those are some of the use cases we productize. So good part is the MFA is enabled. All right, so hopefully we should get back to the presentation. So this particular presentation or the talk, what we are going to concentrate on is one of the biggest challenge in the IT and the security is the noise, right? And which is in fact is created by we thinking that everything in cybersecurity is critical. And that's one of the most detrimental fact that if everything is critical, to be honest, nothing is. And based on which, typically when the businesses look at asking the questions to cybersecurity, that Are aaj Okta implement kar diya. So tell me, like, so are we more secure? So and then the cybersecurity people or the IT people have to answer like, yeah, I mean we have 200,000 users which are now using Okta. Now imagine your CFO giving these answers that, hey, we cannot give you the numbers, but hey, we are using now Tally software, or now we have implemented these new accounting processes, right? So now there's been a lot of talk and discussion from the global CISOs is like, if we have to, provide these reports and we have to have the conversation with the board and the executives, how do we want to make sure that we actually talk the business language? And that's one of the key part of that is essentially is what number of these teams are asking. If you actually go and ask your E team or your security heads or your IT team, what is your security objective, right? And at the end of the day, what comes to light is, we typically get the answer which are synonymous to, okay, we want to be secure to all possible threats, right? But in the corner of our ears and eyes, we actually know that that's not going to be possible. But to be honest, that's actually the root cause, right? Like where all of these issues such as noise or such as making sure that everything what we are doing needs to be showcased in a secure manner is probably the root cause of cybersecurity and the relevant teams. So what is the objective should be? In this case, since obviously we cannot secure what everything what we see, the biggest part what we are learning from a lot of these CISOs and the CIOs is if we have to talk the business language, the only part or only motive probably for the security teams and the IT team is to make sure that we know and eliminate the business risk. At the end of the day, we are here to support our businesses. So if we are saying that if and this is coming from one of the online travel agency, their CISO who first time got a chance to talk with their board, what he mentioned is we have a ransomware risk to our reservation application. If that becomes true, our reservation system will be down by 6 hours. And that opened a lot of eyes to the board to understand, like, okay, now tell me a lot more about ransomware. Okay, now tell me about the threats. Now tell me about the assets which map to it. It didn't talk the language of typical cybersecurity or the typical IT, like, okay, how many patches I deployed, or how many vulnerabilities I found, or how many incidents what we handled. And that's one of the biggest thing what lot of global customers are trying to do is how do we make sure that we actually talk the business language of eliminating the business risk. And then this is all right, like this is all ये सबको पता है, right? Like, I mean, this is like everybody knows. But the problem for the IT and the security team is much deeper, right? Like, and that's one of the reasons why we are not able to do it. So our security research team did some study, right? Like, they did some research. What is the research saying? When we are trying to map business to cybersecurity or IT management, what are we trying to do is trying to understand, like, okay, what is our business based on? If our business is based on these 3 or 4 business processes or business apps or regions, they typically understand that, okay, if all of these assets I know and I know their risk, I would be secure. But one of the biggest part of that is when we looked at the research part, that 31% of the assets, what we found from the external attack surface, which were not known to the IT and the security team, but are known to your attackers. And then the second part of that is when we are trying to map all of this security to business, 45% of the assets what we are managing for security and IT side, they lack the business context. That means a machine which is running a database or a web server is not tagged critical, then everything what we are doing for the risk prioritization is going to go for a toss. So how do we make sure that we actually have the business context mapped to your assets? And then the second part of that is how it's actually increasing our work. How do we make sure that what work we are doing is actually resulting into biggest bang for our buck, that reducing my risk or managing my risk? And this was one of the eye-opening insight what we got. 33% of the assets or the 33% of the software for which you're doing the security and IT management, they don't even matter to your business. For example, you have a database server running and that's running a browser. Why should there be a browser even running for it on which you are doing the security and IT management or patching them, finding its vulnerabilities, managing its incident, etc. And then the other part of that is that's the topic of the day is if everything is critical, then nothing is. If you actually look at prioritizing the vulnerabilities or the misconfiguration provided by NVD or the CVSS based prioritization, we did last year 2.98 billion scans or found those vulnerabilities. Can you imagine how many in percentage were marked critical or high? 78% of those were marked as high as critical. That means if your teams have 5 days to work in a week, 78% of those are marked high and critical, meaning 4 days of your work you're putting in for that, whereas only 18% of those had some sort of indicator of the risk, where those were talked about in the dark web, where those were talked or mapped to the ransomware or malware, etc. That means 3 days of work what we are putting in is actually not resulting into managing the risk for business. So now these are the challenges of how the noise and all these distractions are being created to actually increase our effort, increase our work, and actually not resulting into the risk prioritization. What's the second part of that, right? The NCSC, the Cybersecurity Alliance and the Cybersecurity Center of UK came out with these guidelines. There's a lot of IT folks here and they talk about you need to patch your systems within 5 days for any critical vulnerabilities. 5 days external facing asset and 14 days any asset if it has ransomware or critical vulnerability. And this is right now 30.6 days is today's average. So now you can imagine the gap, what the expectations are and where we are. And 70 days is the time when it is actually getting patched for internal machines. Now, what is the IT team looking at doing? It's not like the IT team is not wanting to work or the security team is not working, right? Their hands are full, like what last year Microsoft just released 55,000 patches. So obviously you guys are busy doing that. So a lot of teams been asking us like, okay, what are the low hanging fruits? So actually, if you see your environment, and this could be applicable to each and every one of you or your subscription, you'll see that almost 33% of the vulnerabilities which are mapped to the ransomware, which are mapped to the CISA catalog of vulnerabilities, are just not got patched from the Patch Tuesday cycle. They just never reached these endpoints because maybe like it was just 2 days cycle or whatever it is. So 33% of these residual vulnerabilities were one of the reasons. And then the 40% of those are actually due to third-party software like Adobe Flash or, for example, the browser what we talked about, etc. And 5% of those are actually truly causing the risk. So now the challenge becomes how do we identify many of these? And then as our infrastructure is getting going in the cloud, obviously the challenges become double or triple, right? And we are all talking about all of these issues which are happening in terms of, number of vulnerabilities, number of misconfigurations in cloud, and number of attack paths, right? The challenge there is now the cloud security has become a soup of acronym, right? You tell me a 3-letter word and it's there in cloud security, right? Like you say ISC, CMP, ISC or KIM and CNAP, you talk about every acronym and it's there in cloud security. At the end of the day, what does it mean? So that's the quote from one of the customers, that at the end of the day, what matters is what I'm doing right now and how I can take it to the cloud. And this is some of the cloud exposure, right? That these are not even like fallen behind. They've been 48% of these IAM user. We all talk about MFA, right? Like there are a lot of attacks been happening using the MFA, which has not been enabled. Look at the number of accounts which do not have today in cloud MFA enabled. Almost 50% of the users do not have MFA enabled. And essentially, the ransomware related part, right? Encrypting your systems. 40% of the data is today remaining unencrypted in cloud. Well, I mean, all of these are issues true. How can I start? Where should I start, right? And again, how do I make sure that all of these noise is taken out and the risk is prioritized? And all of these cloud environments also have all of these vulnerabilities, which can be exploited by the attackers for your cloud environment to be compromised. So how do we make sure that, again, this noise is taken out? That's where what we are, recommending, or the topic what we are going above is essentially simplifying the cybersecurity and the IT risk management and bucketing that into just simple steps, right? First is to make sure that you understand your attack surface and its risk. What does it mean? Is making sure that what is the attack surface from the attacker's point of view, you prioritize that. Second is, how do we make sure that we understand what is the business value at risk from these attack surface? Then talk that language business would understand. And then the third piece of that is, at the end of the day, if you create any kind of dashboard, there is a term these days which is going viral, is dashboard tourism. All these pretty dashboards are of no use if you are not able to eliminate this risk. 100 on 100 points if you actually eliminate the risk. Otherwise, these dashboards are really good to provide somebody a posture view, etc. Attackers don't care about these dashboards, right? They would care and they wouldn't be successful if you actually eliminate the risk. So the third point is super important. So let's go over like the first point, right? Like how do we actually make sure that we know all of your attack surface and its risk? Simple, right? Like you have all of these clouds, data center, you have OT related assets, etc. You are trying to see that all of those, what NIST is recommending, that you understand all of those from internal and external point of your attackers, making sure how your attackers are looking into your environment and not how you are. And then the second part of that is you'll use the technologies, APIs, network, scanner, agent, whatever, right? But importantly, we need to see to it that you are mapping the value of it. How many of these assets or the surface is used by my critical business applications or my processes? But the second part of that is, how do we actually map it to your attacker's capabilities or your threats? Is any of my industry is getting attacked by certain ransomware? When Lockbit was attacking the retail industry, do I have any indicators, any vulnerability mapped to Lockbit? So let's try and map your attack surface, what you found in terms of your assets, and making sure that those threats are also mapped to the same. And this is the part of knowing now your attack surface from outside in point of view and knowing if that is mapped to any threat indicators. Now, how do we do that, right? Like, let's go like one step below. Like, you get all of these indicators. I'm sure you're using tens of tools, from vulnerability management, you're using asset management tools, all of these. Try and see to it that these are mapped to all of these threat feeds. You can use any of those or most of those. These all threat feeds will tell you if there is any activity happening for your industry, for your attack surface and your assets, and then map it to the value of the asset, which would be coming in from your CMDB or whichever tool is your favorite, based on which we absolutely believe that the security and the IT teams need to quantify the risk. That's the only way that is proven in your financial department. Your CFO is giving number to the street, to the board. Security is probably in 30 years, 40 years phase, but that's the only direction is going to go, is making sure that you measure risk and you communicate that risk. The third piece of that is cloud. We talked about all of these hundreds and thousands of buckets which are open, the disks are not encrypted, and the attackers are looking into that. The most important part for you to do the security in cloud is to not look at it in a siloed manner, but to look at it in a combined manner at toxic combination. Try and see to it that which of your workloads are exposed to internet. That's the first step. Then try and see if any of those have vulnerabilities which are mapped to any ransomware activity. Like I talked about Logbit, I talked about Conti, etc. And then try and see if that account, that particular account, has any kind of EBS volumes or disks which are encrypted. And if those accounts have misconfiguration. You look at the charts, those are not probably coming out pretty well, but this is how you will eliminate the noise. You will see these toxic combinations probably would represent only 1 or 2% of your findings. And you can deprioritize all the other 97 or 98% of findings, because those really don't matter, because those are not exposed to your attackers. And those cannot reach your crown jewels. So the toxic combination way, the only way to actually secure, we feel, in your cloud infrastructure. Now, as you know, like you're managing the risk of your infrastructure, your attack surface, etc. The second most important part is to get the confidence of your executives, right? That means you need to talk the language of the business. So here's, we'll do a little bit of interesting point, right? Like let's take a scenario. In this case, I'm going to talk about a couple of companies, right? Like this data is obviously public, so we can talk about it. And the question to all of you is, would you actually pay a ransom of let's say $15 million when you know that your systems could be down to between 4 or 14 days, and essentially which could result into, let's say, $40 million of loss, right? Like over a period of time. Would you pay that ransom? And most of the time right now, the answer would be it depends, right? Like that's the best answer, it depends. Let's say that you would pay this ransom and still you would only be able to recover 90% of your system. Would you still pay? The answer probably still depends. Now, this is the interesting part. Now probably tell me if it represents just 0.14% or 0.15% of your revenue, or you knew that you had high exposure. then would you pay? Now probably the answer is yes. That's what like a lot of executives been saying, because 0.14% is okay, and that's exactly what, if you guys have heard about Caesar's Palace, one of the biggest casinos, they actually knew about this. They knew that what it represent in terms of risk. On day 3rd, they did the ransomware negotiation. On day 4, they paid the ransom. Compared to that, MGM, their competitor, another one of the biggest casinos and the hotel chains, they did not know what their attack surface is and what these attackers are asking, where can they reach. Plus, they did not know what would be the impact on my business would be, the loss would be, which resulted into for 30 days, they couldn't pay, they couldn't make the decision, and they lost probably around $140 million. So probably that would have been that bet. It is not, I'm not anywhere suggesting that we have to pay or make a decision, but that decision has to be based on your risk and the value of that risk to your business. That's the only way you would be able to make that decision in a probably an informative manner. So how do we do that, right? Like you have all of these asset values, you have all of these assets now that you have mentioned, or you probably consolidated the attack surface from step 1. We have to see to it that we actually define what is my business value is going to be off. That would come in from your cyber insurance, or essentially just look into it from your business or the CFO side, like, okay, how much of it maps to my business revenue. Provide that in phase 1 and then map exact losses which could occur if the risk materializes. That will give you an idea that, okay, if whatever is the risk, if it materializes, what would be my loss? And then provide the appetite to which you need to make sure that your risk appetite is managed, and making sure that your risk is always below that appetite, so that you would be able to make this decision whether I'm going to actually have certain issues or not issues in terms of the business value of this asset to which the risk is occurring. Now let's talk about the third piece, right? Like the risk elimination piece, which is interesting because there's a lot of focus, from the security side is on detecting, right? Like, or giving like what is wrong. And at the end of the day, that's one of the biggest reason why the noise is created. The prioritization, tries to help towards it. But at the end of the day, you need to make sure that you are eliminating, you're mitigating the risk to make sure that you're managing it better. What are some of the challenges, right? At the end of the day, it's not like, look, deploying the patch, as you guys know better than me, is deploying the patch is going to take probably a few hours. It is not about just deploying the remediation or the action. It is about making sure from the security and IT side, we are talking the same language of what do I need to first deploy for what particular security issues. And that creates the communication challenges. One of the biggest dreaded line in cybersecurity and the IT is, this is not my issue. This is not my asset. And that is happening because the right data is not provided to the right team. And if you look into any security tool, and if you bring in another tool, you need to create another integration. That creates a challenge. What we are not measuring today, what we measure is mean time to detection, mean time to remediation, etc. The biggest part which is coming to light is mean time to communicate. If that is one of the time gap, why some of these security issues are not getting patched or getting remediated. Now, I just want to be a buzzkill, right? Like a lot of talk, we hear a lot of questions what we get. Hey, what about 0 days? We care about these 0 days. I just want to spoil the party to say that there've been an article and there've been a talk at BlackHat last year where the attackers no longer find 0 days as cost-effective method to target commercial organizations. Just not cost-effective for them. The amount they are spending to buy these 0 days and what they are getting out of it, it just doesn't make commercial sense for them. What they would target the 0 days for is probably the government agencies or probably the Department of Defense, NSA, Secret Services, etc. That's where typically they would get the benefit. What they are targeting, the commercial organization, are nothing but these long tail of known vulnerabilities. All of these are the riskiest vulnerabilities in last 1 year, which got used by top 8 out of 10 ransomware attacks. And these are all known vulnerabilities, by the way. These are the ones what are called long tail of vulnerabilities, not getting patched, are being used by all of the attackers. They're not looking at using 0 days on you, trust me. They're looking at using the ones what you are not patching. And there's an exploit available, and it's basically less effort for them. So now the problem is, if those are not getting patched, what are our options, right? Obviously, because one of the biggest reason why you're not patching is because there's business continuity is going to be impacted for that. So what are our options beyond that? So couple of parts what we have learned from a lot of our customers is essentially a 3-step approach. One is, please look into your environment, what we'll tell you, and what I mentioned from the data insight what our research team came out with. Look at patching these ransomware and CISA-KEV vulnerabilities. There's been a talk in the US that if you get compromised or attacked with the known CISA provided vulnerability, you might not get the cyber insurance. So that's why the CISA KEVs or CISA known catalog of vulnerabilities is becoming a big factor for a lot of customers to make sure that those are patched. And nobody's desktop has ever gone down by applying a Chrome patch. That's the reality. And all of these third-party software and the related ransomware and CISA-KEV vulnerabilities, that exposure is almost 33% of all of your vulnerabilities today on desktop. So get rid of those. That's step one. Step two is that would give you time, your patch teams, your security teams to test the patches for your servers. Use that time to test the patches for your databases, web servers, for your open source applications, etc. That would be the right use of testing patches, soaking patches, etc. What's the third piece of that is to see to it that if any of your desktops or any of your laptops, workstations are using third-party software, see that what's the last usage of that. What we found out, like I mentioned at the start, 33% of these software are not even used in last 30 days. Why are we even doing it security and IT management or its patch management? How about just getting rid of it and actually reduce your attack surface? And that would, like I mentioned, will give a lot of time for your teams to do the right work, which is concentrating on testing patches and deploying patches for your servers. Why we are saying that? And some of the times, and these are the numbers what a lot of customers been able to provide to us. By the way, with Qualys, like we have 10,300 odd customers, out of which 1/3 of customers use the integrated remediation management. And these are the numbers which are anonymized numbers what customers were able to achieve. Just last year, and some of these data points I will share. I'm going to just continue into what then Qualys platforms been helping customers do all of these 3 steps. Essentially, platforms been created from cloud, helping customers do 5 things, right? It understands that your infrastructure by default is hybrid. It's already hybrid. It assumes that, and it provides a hybrid sensor approach to collect your attack surface data. If you have your cloud assets, it actually allows customers to collect the data using agentless manner like snapshot and by collecting the data using API. If you have OT devices, it provides passive sensor. If you have IT devices, laptops, then it provides agent and network scanner. And by the way, last month or probably a last quarter, SEC came out with the guidelines. You must all be using all SaaS applications, right? Office 365, Salesforce, Workday, there are a lot of SaaS applications. SEC came out with the guidelines. It is security and IT's responsibility to secure that SaaS application and the data which is managed to it, not by your SaaS vendor. So now it is going to add another attack surface for you to manage these SaaS applications. So Qualys platform allows you to now know all of your assets, is internal and external attack surface posture, allow you to know all of the vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, prioritize those, and map those to 25+ threat speeds for you to know exactly those 2.5% vulnerabilities which matter to secure from the ransomware and other attacks, and then provide one mechanism to detect and respond to some of these malicious attack vectors, and then provide a mechanism to comply or show compliance to some of the regional and other mandates. What is the use of all of this? Is one of the parts what the platform's been able to do is not just aggregate all of this data what I talked about, right? But actually provide you the correlated toxic combination. If you have your assets which are exposed to internet, the score would come out as say 500. If you have any ransomware exposure, the score will go higher. If the same asset also has the RDP misconfiguration, remember, it is not about vulnerabilities. RDP misconfiguration has been the top vector of the attack. If the same machine, if it is business critical, the risk will go down even higher. And if it doesn't have any mitigating controls, such as no AV or EDR running on it, the risk would go to the highest level. And that is done automatically by the risk algorithm. But what is the outcome, right? The customers which have actually operationalized the true risk method of prioritizing vulnerabilities and remediating those have 80% less ransomware vulnerabilities. That's the outcome some of these global customers were able to achieve. And at the end of the day, we were talking about patch, right? Like, I mean, security teams, they all talk about like, "Arey, aaj maine ye find kiya, ye logbit ka, ye malware find kiya." I mean, that is their glory, right? What is the glory for the IT team today? I mean, yeah, I deployed 100 patches, like 120 patches. What does it mean for business? The IT team would be able to now provide to their executives two outcomes. One is how my mean time to remediation has gone down and come back in SLA for the risk which matters to you business. And then the second part is you would be able to go and tell that we prevented 8 out of 10 ransomware attacks. And that's where the business would see the value of what we are actually doing. And then the third piece of that is Deb, who's our MD of India, who's here. So the team is actually providing your own true risk report if you connect with him to understand if what is your risk and what are some of your low-hanging fruits, what you could do to eliminate this risk as well as your custom true risk report. And then second part of that is a lot of you are from the IT team, and there's been a lot of talk of end of life and end of service software, right? Like, how do we make sure that which software which is end of life or end of service? And by the way, the CISA catalog of vulnerabilities, what I talked about, 50% of those vulnerabilities are due to end of life. So we are providing your custom report of your tech debt or end of life, end of service software mapped to the risk for your own environment as well. And at the end of the day, no topic is complete. I consciously tried to not use the word AI, but the cloud is essentially one of the keywords, obviously. And typically, like, this is looks like DJ, you have provided your own. Is this actual email? All right. So this is like one way what we are helping customers in India as well to provide the solution in an automated manner. With that, would love to have probably Sangram.
Thank you, Shailesh, for providing your golden nuggets of insights on India Security Dialogue.
Thanks for having me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, with continuing this discussion, may we please have on stage Mr. Sangram Gayal, Partner and Managed Services Leader at PwC, who is joining Shailesh for an exciting fireside chat. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of applause, everyone, for Mr. Sangram and Mr. Shailesh. Over to you, gentlemen.
While Shailesh gets ready, I think a very interesting session. Shailesh managed to cover a plethora of topics, and really what I want to do now for the next 10 minutes is how do we make this real, right? As end users or as consumers or even as service providers, how do we take some of this and apply in our day-to-day life, right, Shailesh? So Shailesh, maybe the most interesting thing that I heard, and I don't know if I got the topic right, and I'll dive in, is You talked about dashboard tourism. Let me start with that. Okay.
I knew like when you popped your eyes up, and you like would.
So where did you get that phrase first of all, and why do you think that dashboards really don't deliver value?
So couple of things, right? Like I'll answer it in two parts. So and I won't take the credit for that sentence or that line. But what dashboard tourism talks about is like how you actually go in. Let's say you guys go and say Kashmir, right? Like what we do nowadays, like we all have cell phones. Like lady in front of me has all cell phones. We'll click all these pictures. Do we actually go back and look at them? All these thousands of pictures? And lot of customers are saying like that's what is happening at the end of the day. I have these thousands of dashboards and providing me like all of these millions of data points, and those are actually distracting me or not providing me what exactly I'm supposed to do from all of these dashboards. What I really need to do at the end of the day, the security and IT's job is to make sure I'm reducing the risk. Yes, the dashboards are really great if the insights come out of those and provide those and communicate those to your audience, right? But at the end of the day, why I use that term, what a lot of customers use it, is that it's becoming sort of a distraction from customers to actually go to their journey or reaching that.
So if not dashboards, then what? What should we
The
be
insights
focusing on?
probably, or the combination. The insights are nothing but if your journey is to eliminate the risk, is essentially what will take me there. And those are insights. So I don't want to see a dashboard saying I have 100,000 vulnerabilities. I want to see the toxic combination of I have 5 insights which are mapped to ransomware, which are actually mapped to assets which are critical, and also have the remote exploitation possible. What would it do is the IT team would now know I need to just take care of these 5 things. Immediately they are motivated, like, hey, I'm going to come back into SLA, so it's psychologically better. And then the second part of that is now I know what I need to actually do is to take care of fixing those RDP misconfiguration and these ransomware related 5 things. So insights driven, probably a view is something what we recommend typically.
Okay, interesting. And the other thing that I really picked up was on something that you didn't mention. Any DR, no EDR, no MDR, no XDR, and so on, because we all are not overwhelmed, but kind of thrown these words every day, right? And maybe it's a large part of the spends that security spends that's happening. So really, from your point of view, and as a product manager, I'm sure you're asked the same question day in day out. What should one be really looking at? What are the thoughts when one looks at should we be looking at XDR, MDR, and how do you evaluate what you implement?
Yeah, look, and again, it's probably a 3-step answer, right? The first thing is what is at the end of the day cybersecurity and the risk management means to me, right? Like I need to do essentially 4 things. I need to understand all of my assets. I need to understand its risk exposure, whether those are vulnerabilities or whatever those are. At the end of the day, even if I'm managing those risks, these malicious actors or the incidents could still happen through legitimate channels. So that means I need to have a mechanism to detect and respond to your DR systems in place, and I need to make sure that I show compliance to my auditor, right, at the end of the day. Now the problem today, what is happening with the DR or the challenges, if you are asking that question, those are sort of disconnected from all of these 3 things what I'm talking about. The asset management, which is one pillar, the vulnerability risk management, which is the second pillar, which I would include a patching as a part of vulnerability risk management. The DRs today problem is they're disconnected from those 2 major systems today. So what is happening is you can relate now this problem with what is out there in the industry. Every year the data will come out, 70% of the organization had repetition of the attack. We are using best of the DRs, right? Like we are using CrowdStrike, Sentinel-1, we are using, you talk about the best EDRs, every customer is using. Then why is like 70% are having the repetition of the attack? The problem is the DRs don't map the root cause of why the attack has happened to these left two systems of asset and the vulnerability risk management.
So you're basically saying uh, DRs or EDRs, MDRs are like band-aids, but really the root cause is somewhere else within the systems,
Yeah.
which is unaddressed.
Yeah, and that root cause typically needs to be understood that, okay, why the attack has happened, because I had underlying, say, blue key vulnerability. Okay, where else do I have in my environment? Okay, all other 50 systems have that. So let's go ahead and patch it so that the attack doesn't happen in my environment again. So that connection is, I feel, is really important for DR to map it to the asset system and to map it to the vulnerability and patch.
So which is the most or in generally when you talk to your customers or do your surveys and so on. So what do you find the weakest area out of all the areas? Is it asset management? Is it the vulnerability management? Is it the patch management? Which is the weakest area which really needs improvement?
Yeah, it's going to be a little controversial, but I would say the asset management, a lot of customers find it extremely difficult. And the reason for that is the continuous journey the innovation is taking, right? By the time I mean, everybody has good handle today, obviously, on the laptops, desktop, and the servers, on-premise environment, etc., right? We don't have today good handle on our cloud related services, resources, workloads today. Tomorrow, as this Gen AI and the AI thing is becoming hot, do we actually know like which assets are running the Gen AI packages, which could be hacked by a lot of customers? So I would say the visibility into assets is so important and base of good cybersecurity hygiene. That's typically, I feel that that's been a challenge. What a lot of customers have said.
And is there a good way to solve this problem? Because asset management problems been with us for ages, right? And really we've tried a number of things. And you did mention CMDB is not equal to an asset database. It's not equal to where the risk lies. So is there a good way?
Yeah. So there are a couple of ways what we are seeing. Some of the customers which have been managing it pretty well is number one part is just establishing that I need a mechanism to collect all of this data somewhere. And that mechanism is based on multiple ways. I need a way, there's no single magic bullet to it, right? You need a way to use APIs to get the data of your SaaS applications and your cloud resources. Put it somewhere. You need to make sure that those systems, and I don't want to necessarily criticize CMDBs because those were architected for different purposes. The problem happened is we started using it from security side to know the asset base. Now we have to make sure that wherever we are managing all of this, whether it's the Excel sheet even, or wherever those systems, your data warehouses are, those are dynamic in nature to get this data every 15 seconds, every 1 minute, every 2 minutes or not. If those asset management systems are not going to get data this fast and at that big scale, they are never going to have the cloud-based systems which your developers and engineering are using. So probably I would say that like the big data systems is something what a lot of customers been using for their asset repository.
Yeah, no, I think this. I just remembered a very interesting incident. So someone had asked me, "Is CMDB very important?" I said, "Yes, of course it is very important, right?" They asked me, "In a cloud world, I mean, is there really a CMDB you can create? Because everything is on demand. You're spinning new servers, you're spinning new workloads, you're spinning new, sandboxes at every given instance, just based on the workload, right? And what are you going to put in your CMDB? And it's a very different sort of challenge.
Yeah, and by the way, so CMDBs sort of still have a place. Like some of the customers use it for two purposes. One is what they got architected very well for is the ownership information.
Yeah.
So, and that sort of helped the security team solve this challenge of this is not my asset, right? They actually know like, okay, this laptop belongs to which person, or this particular server has maybe a database running and this database team belongs to person XYZ. That part they manage it pretty well, map it well, and the security teams been using it pretty well to make sure that the right tickets are going on the right people's names.
No, I agree with you. Changing gears a little bit on this, when we talk about security, the first thing that comes to our mind is compliance, right? And a lot of us drive security as a compliance function. It could be for regulations, it could be for, it could be for internal compliances. Your auditors have asked you to do certain things, or it could be industry standard compliances that one has adopted, right? Uh, and while that has ensured some level of maturity in a lot of organizations, but I think the menace of ransomware really requires a mindset shift, right? In terms of what we really need to do. So, what should organizations be doing in your view to really create that shift from a non-audit kind of a mindset, moving to a little bit of innovative mindset to implement security?
Yeah, and it's interesting question, Sangram. I know so you work obviously at PwC.
Yeah, for me, compliance is very important.
Yeah,
I mean, if the regulator says, I say implement
yeah,
it. I don't apply my mind.
Yeah, exactly. And I spent a good bit of time in my previous experience before Qualys in creating, in fact, compliance line of products. So that's interesting. So today, like a lot of teams say, like compliance is not security, right? And to be honest, I find that statement pretty cute. Yes, compliance is not security, but compliance actually creates a baseline for your security related parameters, what we need to do. Obviously, that is just a start. And now how you need to expand it for good security practices is include your new age infrastructure. Compliance is not going to talk about, compliance will say you should have good password hygiene or policy. It's not going to ever say like, oh, your cloud environment should also be included in it. So as a good security practitioner, what you need to do is essentially extend that policy or your compliance control to your new age infrastructure like cloud, or tomorrow even for that matter for Gen AI or even for containerized environment, and make sure that you're doing the password policy management then for all of your infrastructure, including your SaaS infrastructure. Like we all talk about MFA should be enabled, and every time we hear that some of these attacks happen from the SaaS applications where the MFA is not enabled, compliance is rightly telling you to have it MFA enabled and checked.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think baselines are important, but yeah, you need to think a little beyond baselines.
Yeah.
Finally, I want to ask you, what's as a product management function, what's keeping you busy? What are the new things that you're spending your time on? What is it that you're trying to give the world something fresh? Is there something that's happening in security that we need to know, especially at your end?
Yeah, great question, Sangram. So I would say two things. So one is, and essentially that was the gist of the topic today, where we are in from the IT and the security side, is we are never going to be ahead of the vulnerabilities, and how do we then make sure that the right data bubbles up, we actually prioritize our risk better, we communicate that much better to our executives. At the other interesting part is, and I was talking yesterday, that security and the IT team have interesting jobs, because all of their success depends on all the other teams. Security team success depends on the IT team, it depends on the cloud team, DevOps team, etc. They need to do something for their success. So how do we actually communicate the right data, motivate that, showcase them the indicator, what would be the benefit? So what platform, what we are working on with customers is to make sure that the right data is actually provided as insights to their stakeholders, which security teams can take and drive the actions from other teams. And then the third piece, what is interesting, what we are working on, is what can our customers do if they cannot patch. There's been a lot of, if I ask you, there could be 100 reasons why I cannot patch. Okay, could you tell me what can you do? Okay, I cannot patch. Can I mitigate the risk? Can I compensate that better? Can I actually translate or transfer that much better? So those are some of the innovations what we are bringing in, where the business continues, where the patching doesn't actually makes a hurdle, and we provide options beyond patching for customers to go and mitigate these risks. And then the second part is, how do we actually extend the platform for new age infrastructure? How do we make sure that the customers are able to now secure their Gen AI and the related landscape? Everybody is talking about using AI for security, and a lot of AI attack surface has been created. How many of we actually know which laptops are using the AI packages? Which of these are actually scanned for LLM? So those are some of the innovations what we are bringing in for helping our customers secure their new age attack surfaces.
Okay, so I heard insights, I heard patch management, and I heard security for AI and the new age infrastructure. So are these currently available? Are they in development? Can I go and
They
buy
are
them?
absolutely available, and that's why we have the India team here with us. So Deb is right here, and you can absolutely get hold of him, and he would be able to showcase this.
All right, fantastic, and thank you so much, Shailesh, for spending time with us. It was a wonderful session, and look forward to interacting you on the break. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sangram, and everybody for having me. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Shailesh Athalye and Mr. Sangram for addressing our, taking this chat up for as part of India Security Dialogue. Now, but before we move on, we have some questions from our audience members, which I would request you to please take it up and answer it for our audience.
I thought we were
members.
going to be left, easily. So.
Well, not so easily, because this is the first time we are having this India Security Dialogue. So yes, I think these questions are very important, and I request any one of you if you can answer this. So the first question that we have from our audience member is, what is the remediation strategy to balance business availability and reducing risk?
That's pretty interesting. I think Sangram tried to touch base on that topic. Some of the strategies, like a lot of customers are looking at doing, and it depends, right, what extreme side you are on. But there are customers who are saying that I'm going to actually isolate my system till the time somebody is actually going to remediate some of the risks. Whereas on the softer side, a lot of customers are seeing like, what are the options to mitigate these risks? Can I change the paths of my application so that the vulnerability doesn't get exploited? Some of the innovations, what a lot of customers said, simple things like, can I change just the name of the DLL so that the attackers don't find them? Can I just change the paths of some of these? And to the advanced mechanisms such as creating a virtual block, right, so that the vulnerability doesn't get exploited. And then sometimes in between, somewhere in the balancing act, are the things like, can I change some parameters so that I fix some registry keys? I can just remove the JNDI class, right? Like classic mitigation. Instead of updating your Java for log4j, I can just remove now the JNDI class. So some of these mitigations and the techniques what some of the customers are using.
No, I think the balance between business continuity and security, I think that's a very tricky one. So one is everything that Shailesh mentioned, but the other thing is also one needs to also look at what is the acceptable downtime for an organization. And there are a few good examples in Shailesh's, the PowerPoint that he gave. When does it become really serious for you? Is it 2 hours? Is it 4 hours? Is it 8 hours or 16 hours? So understanding your risk appetite and making your decisions accordingly. That's one. Second thing is knowing your landscape. Today, and Log4j is a very classic example, right? That was a vulnerability that was embedded into everything that we used. And really knowing where does the software come in, what is the supply chain, and how do you balance wanting a particular software implemented versus the risk that it brings in. So that becomes another challenge. So I think this topic is getting a lot more complex, but there is one really needs to balance it out with how much is that you can afford to lose, how much you cannot. I think that's where one needs to have a deep down assessment.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for answering that. Now we move on to the second question, and this is a very interesting question, I must say. So the second question that is put forward by our audience members is, the DBIR report once again talks about an increase in ransomware risk. So what do you think are some of the key tactics that organizations can take to deal with this big menace?
Oh, that's a pretty loaded question. Yeah, so there's no obviously silver bullet, right? Like ransomware. Now what I want to say is probably the ransomware is not a desktop or the workstation problem. It's not a credential stealing based problem. It is not a cloud problem, right? Ransomware risk management is an enterprise problem. An enterprise process is going to be needed from start to finish, right? Like we'll talk about the start part, right? Do we actually know how attackers are looking into my asset? 90% of the attacks start from some attackers knowing that you have a system out there on internet and exposed on Shodan or dark web. Simple as that. So do we actually know how many of my systems are exposed outside? And that's the basic part of that. The second is then we have all these threat indicators. We know all of these CISA catalog of vulnerabilities. That's what they are providing. So we need to absolutely make sure that those are assessed for your critical business application. The third piece of that is we need to make sure that the DRs, what Sangram talked about, we are able to detect those, respond to those, and then recover those systems well. But the most important part, I think from the process point of view, a lot of times we miss is getting our communication and our leaders on the same board, on the same channel. What is going to be our steps if the ransomware attack happens? How can we make the decision to pay ransomware or not? That needs to be based on what is my risk tolerance, what is my risk today, and if it is actually going to have unavailability to my business critical application, so that all teams would be on the same page and we take all of those steps and make decisions. Sangram, I'm sure like you must be hearing that a lot.
Yeah, no, so all amazingly valid points. But when it comes to ransomware, I have a slightly different point of view. And it is, I mean, it is, all these are great points, but the point of view I hold is the smallest of event, the smallest of vulnerability could be a starting point for a major ransomware event. So when I tell my clients, hey, look, I mean, you've got this vulnerability or you've got this incident, and most people are, coming back and telling me, hey, look, I mean, I'm not able to justify security investments to my board members, to my CXOs, and so on. Why should I be even doing it? Or even when we give out multiple reports on you need to patch this, you need to look into this event, investigate this event, they think it's a small event. They think it's a small virus, small malware. But you don't know which of those ones tomorrow go out and lead the path for a larger one. It's like this. When the anti-terrorist squad catches maybe a person with a small revolver, is it that they've stumbled upon a sleeper cell which was planning to do a big bomb blast? I don't know. I mean, maybe yes, or maybe it was just one individual person, right? But each of those individual events need to be tackled. Each of those individual vulnerabilities need to be tackled and shut down, because there is no way that you can know of the big event in advance. So all you can do as security professional, and that's unfortunately true, that keep tackling the petty crime, keep tackling the small security issues that you continuously see in your environment.
Awesome.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Shailesh and Sangram, for joining us on this very important discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a big round of applause for Mr. Shailesh Athalye and Mr. Sangram Gayal, who have joined us for the India Security Dialogue.
Thank you so much for your time.
Can we have a big round of applause, everyone? Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.